All right, welcome everybody back to Swarmstead Bees and Gardening Live. Also, this will be posted to the Mite Beekeeping podcast. My guest today is Tony Andric. He's from Central Texas, was that? Or
Yes. Yeah, just south of Austin.
all right, so Tony's from Central Texas. He's a treatment-free beekeeper, also the creator of the Everything Bee Vac, um, which I'm sure a lot of people who watch this channel and listen have seen on plenty of YouTube channels. And he was kind enough to come on and tell me about his experience being a treatment-free beekeeper, and just we're gonna have a nice wide open chat and have a good time here. So if there's anything you want to tell us, Tony, to get started, go
Sure,
ahead.
sure. A little bit about my background. So I'm a recovering electrical engineer. I did that for decades. About 10 years, well, actually over 10 years ago now, I left the computer corporate world and opened a business with a buddy of mine. And this will sound funny, but we make automatic doors for chicken coops. But we've got three guys. All they do is build doors for us. So I've been doing that. And we try not to work too hard because we're all old guys. So we work 3 days a week, which gives me time to go chase my bees. And so around 8 or 10 years ago, I was at a Mother Earth fair up north of Austin. And the company called Man Lake, had never heard of them, was there. And they had a really good price on a Langstroth hive. And I love bargains. And I'd always kind of wanted to do bees. And my brother-in-law had just gotten a colony. He had worked bees as a kid, 50, 60 years ago. And so he could have helped me some, and the hive was there, and I bought it. And pretty much every year I've been doubling my numbers. And I consider there's two great addictions in this world. The first is God, the second is beekeeping. And if you can get both of those, your life is going to be wonderful. But I've actually never paid a penny for a single bee. I laugh now because if you go out and buy queens, gram for gram, queens are more expensive than gold.
Well,
So if you give your wife a bunch of queens, she should take that as a true sign of love. Although my wife wouldn't appreciate that. But yeah, every colony I've got has been a removal I've done over the years. I've sold quite a few colonies, splits and so on and so forth. To answer the first question that was out there, so I am one of the, when I started in beekeeping, I don't know what it was, 8 years ago, there was kind of this secret handshake of, you never said you were treatment free, although I didn't even know what that really meant. But, you do the secret handshake and say, hey, are your bees, wild ones, or are they, Italians? And you figure out, okay, we can actually have a conversation, because most people just didn't talk about it. And and this may surprise you, I'm a bit of a loudmouth. What I do, I say, you don't agree with me, you agree with me, that's okay. We can always agree to disagree. But I'll talk about what I'm doing. And and all of us that go through this here in Texas and in other states, in the southern half of the country, there is no good way of learning how to take care of colonies that are very defensive. You learn on your own that leather gloves are called pin cushions. And full suits and temperament doesn't matter. And this whole don't entrance, go from the front of the hive. It could be thundering outside and strong winds, and I'll walk up to the front of the hive, and I really don't notice a difference in their temperaments from that to a beautiful sunny calm day at 2 p.m. But anyways, to answer this first question, one of the things that shocked me, you're talking about 50-60% losses. The last, not counting that we had the Arctic Circle weather last February, I'll talk about that. Outside of that, I average probably 5 or 10% losses per year. It's a pretty small amount. And I've got a lot of friends, they're in their hives every 2 weeks. Most of my hives I go to between 6 and 10 times a year. Pretty much I go in, I give them supers, I take supers, I do splits. I do in Texas, where I am at least. It's not a big honey. You might average 25, maybe 50 pounds per colony per year of honey. Um, but so if you're taking that honey, they really need it to get through winter. So you feed them the sugar water as a substitute. But
Yeah, absolutely.
overall, the colonies just they met, and I joke that here in Texas, and at different states have different things, but we laugh that everything here is trying to kill you. Um, we've got whether you count the rattlesnakes and copperheads, or you go to the scorpions. Of course, we have the Africanized bees, but I consider them my little sweethearts. Um, but everything here is the weeds that grow, the speargrass, you name it. All these things are trying to kill you. And with the bees, it's the same thing. Um, I've got the business, I've got the church stuff and things going on. I'm not going to sit here with a shield and a sword to defend my colonies. And I've got 10, 15 years. I've got about probably 80 hives. Um, so I'm not going to sit there and defend my hives when a scorpion comes in, when a spider's in front, when wasps, yellow jackets attack. My bees have to take care of themselves. And your Italian, it's really fun because I can sit here and watch colonies side by side, and I can tell you which one's Italians because those bees come in and it's like they're flying in slow motion. They land on the landing board and then move their way in, like an elephant. Whereas the meaner colonies, they don't have time to dilly dally. They fly in, they're zooming, and they land 4 inches inside the hive. There's not a lot of bees out there uh, sitting on the running board. Now I've redesigned my hives. While I use Langstroth, I don't use the bottom entrance. Um, the bottom entrance is great for skunks to come up and scratch at and get bees out and so forth. But and I stole this idea straight from Michael Bush up in Nebraska. Um, he took, get rid of that bottom entrance, get rid of the whole telescoping cover. And my bottom board, I like to use, if you do you know what Advantech is?
Yeah, yeah. I have a couple bottom boards.
Okay. Piece of Advantech, I'll drill a hole, about 2-3 inches, staple a piece of screen on top of that. That's my bottom board. That hole is a little ventilation. My top board, you get those 15-inch wood shims,
Yeah.
staple one underneath on both sides.
Mhm.
And the only change I made compared to what Michael Bush does, I'll take some hardware cloth and staple that against the top so that while it's ventilated, the bees only have maybe 2 inches on one side as their real entrance.
Yeah.
Um, and that's worked pretty well. It's a whole lot less expensive. And that you get a whole bunch of advantages. If the bees want to sit on their porch, they're not going to get hit by rain. You don't worry about skunks. It's a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah, I did a few that way a few years ago. My only problem with that was with the shims. They propolized between the top of the frames in the top box and the lid. That little gap that's formed from the shims, and it was a ton of propolis there. It kind of made it a pain to get the lid off. But thinking back, there's probably some ways I could have not had that happen. Maybe using some type of slick, inner cover under the lid, maybe out of a feed bag or something that it doesn't stick to as well. But it was not a big problem, but it was a bunch to kind of scrape off when I took the lid off.
Okay.
A few
I
times.
get a little bit of propolis, not tons. Another thing I do is, and this, everyone always fights with cross comb, and I did this for years where when you separate the boxes, it's all drone brood between every, one frame to the next because bees love making a lot of drones. And of course, the standard cell size is too small for them because I use plastic foundation. And what I discovered, and just because I'm cheap, I was using a lot of foundationless frames. You get the little wedge on top. Kelly B used to make them. Of course, when Man Lake bought them out, that they took away this SKU. But in every hive, I try and put at least one foundationless frame, and the bees draw all the comb. A lot of times it'll be half or even all drone comb. But what I discovered was when that space was available for them to have their drones, I've got nearly zero frame-to-frame brood issues anymore.
Okay, so you give them plenty of space to get that out of their system, and then you have less cross comb.
Yeah.
I mean, I use mostly foundationless frames, and I kind of give them a little bit more space to work. So I really don't have many cross comb issues either, unless something's really tilted wrong or I give them too many frames. But yeah, I don't know why people have problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
With a good enough comb guide, level hive during a flow, I don't know. I don't have any problems with it. But you did say a lot of things that I was like, the whole time you're saying, I was like, oh man. I mean, first, we're almost like twins because, I mean, I'm always saying, don't buy bees. Get your bees from removals. Go out and earn your bees. Over here, I don't talk about commercial beekeeping practices. I don't give a shit about commercial beekeepers or any of their anything that they have going on. So for someone like me or you or anyone that keeps fewer colonies, you can go out and get that many bees. I can. They're out there, and it's just great that you've never ever bought bees. When I see so many people buying so many bees, like way too many every single year, and they just keep, I don't know what they're thinking. And before anyone says it, in a comment, I'd like to just play devil's advocate. I don't know if it'd be devil's advocate, but what they'll say about you and someone in Texas is, of course, you can treat bees without treatments and have good survival rates because you have Africanized bees, and they're this and they're that, and there's really nothing to back that up that Africanized bees are any better than any other bees, because I've interviewed and spoken to several people from Africa that were there when mites were discovered in South Africa, and they took major losses, but they never treated, and that's why that's not even a conversation over there now. It's a few podcasts back. I think it was titled "Is Africa or is South Africa past the Varroa mite?" And the guy who I talked to was great. He just told me all about how we don't even talk about that. It's not even a subject. They catch all their own free bees. And he can only hear from the old timers about how when the Varroa mite showed up there, just how much of a big deal it was. It killed tons and tons of actual African bees in Africa. So, and so how about the beekeepers around Texas? Do a lot of them, if you're having such success without treating at all, do people in Texas treat their bees? It seems like
so. It depends on what area. That's a great question, and it depends on kind of what group and what. I look at things as different clubs. We've got the club in the county next to me. Usually, I'm presenting there, and you've got clubs up in Austin and around Houston and Dallas and so forth. And really, what I find is the people who are leading those different groups are the ones that kind of influence how those individual beekeepers treat their bees. I was surprised. If we average probably maybe 15 people in our club meetings, and a few months ago I'd asked how many of you are treatment free, and it was probably 80+%, maybe 90%. And I was surprised that it was that high, because I try to be fair and I say, look, I don't treat, but if you've got Italians or gentler bees or the regular bought bees, you're going to have some varroa issues and you're going to have some losses. And if you want to avoid that, go and do your treatments. It's not my thing, but understand a lot of those genetics aren't really set up to be able to defend themselves. And one thing I joke about with the Africanized bees is, a scorpion comes in, the bees mob it and kill it. Yellow jacket comes in, they mob it and kill it. A skunk comes along and tries to get them out. They go out and sting it and drive it away. All these things attack and they defend. And then the beekeeper, me, comes along, opens up the hive, and they try and kill me. Well, 99% of the time, they're doing the right thing. They are defending their hive from an invader. If I ripped the roof off of your house, you would probably, reach over, grab a gun or something and try and defend your home. And that's really what we're doing when we open up the hives. One thing we've discovered just through pain is, a lot of people say the more you go in your hives, the better the bees know you and the gentler they're going to be. That's the conventional wisdom. With meaner colonies, it's the exact opposite. If I'm in those hives once a week for 3 months, after the first month or two, they're going to be ready and just mobbing me and I have to do this regularly, just shake my face off so I can see because there's so many getting on me. If I go less frequently, they're more relaxed with me coming in and doing what I need to do. And also, I know so many people that every time they inspect their hives, they go in and they're looking at every frame of brood. They're hunting for their queen. They're counting and writing notes, and it's 15, 20 minutes per hive of panic within the colony. And something I emphasize is the majority of queens, when their hive is opened up and they're exposed to all this light, they start freaking out. And I've read studies that talk about it can take a queen up to a full day, 24 hours, before she stops running and hiding and calms down and goes and starts laying eggs again. So I don't go, here's the wonderful thing. With the high survival rates, it doesn't take long to open up a colony. There's a lot of bees. If I can find brood, I know I've got a good queen. If there's too much stuff going on, I usually have the equipment with me to do a splits. And then and this is a really interesting trait, the Africanized genetics, the bees tend to emerge about a day sooner than your more domesticated Italians. So where you count 16 days for a queen, it might be 15 days for me, or 21 days for a worker is really 20 days. So it's slightly faster. I don't know why, it's just been shown. But the other thing is, they say, Africanized bees are really mean. But I'll tell you, they've got great family relationships. It is not uncommon for especially when you're in the later springtime and swarm season, for the queen to be in the hive, and she might have 3 or 4 mated daughters in the same hive, and they are all laying 1,000+ eggs a day. And the workers kind of keep them separate. It's like, okay, mom, you've got these frames, and daughter 1 and daughter 2, and they're split up. But one thing we talk about is how big the Africanized colonies, how quickly they grow. And I saw one study that said somewhere in the order of 20% of the time, there's more than one queen in the colony. So you can go hunt and find one queen, and there might be 1, 2, 3 more in there hiding. But I don't know if it's just the Africanized genetics or the meaner genetics, but that's something that's been pretty well shown to be a trait or a characteristic of the bees around here.
Yeah, I've never found, well, I can't say never. I mean, I've found 2 queens in a colony before, or on a day when just a whole bunch of unmated queens hatch at the same time. I found like 8 or 9 at the same time, but they were getting ready to take off or get killed anyway very soon. I just happened to get in at the crazy time. So just can you tell me a little bit more about the beekeepers who you talk to? What type of survival rates do the other areas in Texas have?
It's all over the place. It's not uncommon. And actually, I'll talk about the winter as well. But that what is it, 40-50% loss is really not uncommon. I've got friends that they're getting 60% losses annually, or more, 70-80%. And it really depends on people's techniques and the genetics and what they're doing. So an example, and this was actually an eye-opening moment for me. Year before last, in February, we had a deep freeze. Now, keep in mind, we might average 1 or 2 or 3 days per year that actually at night will get below freezing. Well, this was, several days in a row that not only got below freezing, it didn't even get back up to freezing during the day. And we had lows in the single-digit range, which for this area is completely unheard of. Everything was shut down. We don't have any equipment to deal with snow and ice on the roads. So, there's no salt trucks running around out there. And in that, I'll call it that month period, because it took me a while to get out to all my yards. But I probably had a 15 or 20% loss just in that month or so. And what I had a number of colonies that, you baby them along and you give them frames of brood and you hope they make a better queen. And it was just bottle feeding continuously on these colonies. And the majority of those colonies died with the deep freeze. They couldn't handle it. They failed. End of story. And at first I was kind of upset about losing so many colonies. But what I realized over the coming months following that spring was that I went into spring with, let's say 70-80% of my numbers, but every one of those colonies started absolutely kicking butt. They didn't slowly ramp. I didn't have to give anybody any brood. I was splitting like crazy, and it was a whole lot more fun. And I realized then that, people that say, you're mean for letting your colonies die. Well, I tell you what, from the lessons I learned there is it's mean to keep colonies on life support, barely alive, for months or years on end. You know what? If you've got someone that's and I'm not a fan of, assisted suicide and stuff, but if you've got a family member who's in absolute pure 24/7 agony, maybe it's time for God to call them home. I'm not going to do, excessive life-saving actions on someone that they're at end of life and it's time for them to go home.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because it jogged a little memory for me, and it was something that I've been looking for the opportunity to say. A couple weeks ago, I was watching a live stream with a very, very huge commercial beekeeper who just, a celebrity among commercial beekeeping people and people who watch YouTube. And, always nice, always never talks about treatments. Treats his bees, obviously, he lives in a very cold climate, treats them, but always makes a point to not want to talk about treatments. But I guess the host didn't really care that he didn't want to talk about treatments or didn't know. So he said, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your treatment regimen? So he started his spiel about, I really don't like talking about treatments. But then he said what you said. He said, but I just don't see how these treatment-free beekeepers can just let their colonies die. Like, how do you just let them sit there and die? And for a while, I kind of struggled with that charge, like that people would charge me with letting bees die. So I used to just say, well, if they're no good, then I let them die, But after thinking about it, what I actually do is I don't let them die. I let them fight, and it just so happens that sometimes they don't win that fight. And that's how you end up with better bees, by giving them the chance to fight. You can't throw the towel in for them just because you see a high mite count. if you throw the towel in and you don't let them fight and you fight for them, you're gonna end up with the same garbage year after year. So no, I don't let my bees die. I let them fight, and sometimes they do die. And a good example is another colony just today that I caught as a swarm in a trap. I was going to leave them in the trap for the season, like I've done, a dozen times before. And today they're getting completely robbed out, and that doesn't happen to a healthy colony. It's not my experience to have a queen right, strong colony that you didn't drip something around for them to just get attacked and robbed because I have a bunch of bees here. Something was going wrong, that left those bees to leave their honey unprotected. Something went wrong, whether they were crashing or it could have been simple as a queen failure or something like that. But I noticed a couple weeks ago I wasn't seeing as much traffic, and then I saw very little traffic. So I couldn't tell if they were just staying in because it was chilly. Well, today it was clear. I mean, there was just wax dragged out the front, a whole black cloud of bees going in there. But for me, it was probably 70 pounds of honey in there. And I got 50 something colonies here in my backyard. So that's just another pound and a little bit over a pound for each colony there. And that's one less that I gotta worry about contributing bad genetics to my yard. So I have enough honey. I have enough bees. I'm not gonna stress over one colony. So it's just something that happens in the fall.
Hand in hand with that, they say, how can you let your bees die? Well, the implication there is you go and you shake out all the bees out of the frames. I rarely go and do that. I'll get them a frame from another colony because sometimes they'll cycle through rough times, but they've got to prove themselves out. I saw a really good slide from a beekeeper down here in Texas a few months ago. And what he was showing was there was ideal, there was kind of the minimum, and then there's the week I give up. And he went month by month, how many frames of bees in a colony would you like to see for a strong, what do you consider a weak colony? And a number varies. In summertime it's higher, in wintertime it rolls off. But let's say you've got one frame of bees going into winter. In his mindset, they're not worth trying to save. He'll just go shake them out, let them disperse to other colonies, and that's the end of that. I really try and give them every opportunity, and then I'll go back, and then, of course, I wait too long, and there's wax moth, takeover. But, okay, that's what scraper's for. So I think I give my bees more opportunities than these big guys do, because I don't just, throw them out and let them go to the other colonies. So, if they want to say things, that's their prerogative. But I really don't see it that way. So,
yeah. I don't, as far as shaking bees out, I definitely do shake colonies out, but usually that's only laying worker colonies or maybe a box of bees that I've given several chances to raise a queen and they just cannot get queen right no matter what. And I just kind of feel like all the bees are getting old, so just shake them out. And I don't see anything cruel about that. They're all going to another box to go work until they die of old age. Now I have a bunch of drawn frames I can use on other bees. So yeah,
an interesting story. I was talking to a fellow. He's from Hungary, and he was in Florida now. But we were talking about the Italians, and I like to make fun of Italian bees because they're just a bunch of sissies. Well, I say that, I don't mean that as an insult, but they don't defend their colonies. They really don't. And he was saying in Hungary, Italian bees are treated the way Africanized bees are treated in Florida. If an inspector comes and he believes you have Italian bees, you've got to destroy those colonies right then and there. Carniolans kind of dominate the country, and the mindset is Italians are notorious for robbing out other colonies, for going in and with a small cluster taking over, killing the other queen and taking over colonies. And what's funny is as he's talking, that's exactly what Africanized bees are accused of doing, and they really don't. Well, they'll go and do takeovers, but there's very, very little robbing that goes out until a colony is near the end. If I've got 5 healthy colonies, when I go and I do my inspections, now keep in mind, usually it's a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute maximum per colony that I go in there. I never ever have trouble with robbing. You know, colonies, they know to go out and get their food. They're not into just stealing each other. It's like churches. You know, my church doesn't need to go and steal the good Christians from the church 2 blocks away, and they don't need to come steal our Christians. It's not going to work, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know how that works, but
and
here I don't even buy the idea that there's Italian bees or I mean, they're all, if unless they're doing instrumental insemination going back to the 1920s, maybe they might call them Italian bees because of their color for some reason, or carniolans or whatever. I kind of like, my bees are all from removals. They're all swarm removals or cutouts that I've had, some of them since 2016. They're just like a big blender of bees. You couldn't walk up to any of my colonies and say those were Italians. They're almost all dark. There are some light ones, but I mean, okay. I mean, I don't know the whole Italian idea
I'm actually trying to create my own genetic pool from, oh gosh, in about a 5 mile stretch of the road where I live here. I've probably got 10 bee yards, 300 yards that way, a mile that way, half mile that way. And I've flooded this area intentionally. And in Texas, a wonderful thing is that, well, property taxes are through the roof. And if you've got more than 5 acres, you can use bees as your ag valuation. So people are actually paying me to put bees on their properties and keep the bees. I get the honey, I get everything, and money from those people. So it works out great.
Yeah,
But
that's awesome.
like I said, I've got about 10 bee yards very close. And my goal is, with time, to kind of steer the genetics in the direction I want. Obviously survivorship is crucial, and some productivity. And I've got other yards a good distance where I keep my Venus colonies. I mean, some of those yards, it's a mile to the nearest human being. It's hay fields and cows. But over here, I'd like to be a little bit nicer because they are, a few hundred feet from homes.
Yeah, so it's that's similar, kind of like to what I'm doing. I mean, I have somewhere around 50 colonies here in my yard that, of course, they're all absolute strict survivor bees. There's absolutely no propping whatsoever. They're all just the best you can possibly get. But I do know down the road, not even a quarter mile down the road, there's a big giant church building where this summer a lady was talking to me. That a lot of people just take walks up and down the road with their dog, and she said, we have bees up there in the church wall that have been there for 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, cool. If you ever see any bees hanging there, just can you call me up? And they took my card. Everybody knows me here in this area. It's just a big long road. So I don't just look at it as my yard of bees. That church colony up the road is well within mating distance of my bees, and I'm sure they interact. Plus, there's little patches of forest between these farmlands out here, just gigantic trees. You can just look around. There's holes in all of them. So I do focus on just doing the best that I can with mine, but the area is still, the feral bees are still part of your apiary, really, even though you're not in them. They're doing fine without me or you, and even the ones that I don't know of.
I mean, there's going to be other people, and there's going to be feral colonies. My goal is to influence the entire pool of genetics over time to create this bubble of wherever I want it to go. If I want them to get meaner or nicer or wear pink blue hats, whatever, I'd like to be able to have enough colonies to drive that.
Yeah, I've seen how the Africanized bees in Puerto Rico and in Cuba, that's what they started with, like those mean bees, and they work with them enough now to where they can actually work their bees. You know, maybe not suitless, but they're nothing like what I see some of these videos are.
I've heard about Puerto Rico. I haven't heard about Cuba, but yeah, Puerto Rico, they got really mean, and then over a year or two span, they just all relaxed. One thing I tell people a lot of times is they say, "Oh, my bees are mean," and I go reference one of my videos, and they come back and say, "Oh, okay, they're not mean like yours. They're just to them
They're
they think
still
they're mean. They need to wear a jacket." And one thing I tell people is a lot of times it's a question of me, the beekeeper, I have to play detective. These bees have gotten meaner, and it's not, everyone immediately says, oh, replace the queen. Well, what I'll tell you is it's not the queen 99% of the time. It's a predator, a pest, hunger, seasonality. I need to play detective, figure out what's going on. The hive's leaning the wrong way, or there's a water humidity problem, or mold. I mean, you name it. Figure out why they're upset and fix it. If it's a skunk, okay, go shoot the skunk. Problem solved. But let me fix the main problem and let the bees be happy. I mean, really, they want to be happy, but things in the world make them upset, just like they make us upset. And it's my job. I'm not going to sit here and defend the bees every day from scorpions and wasps and so forth. But if they don't have enough room, it's my job to go in there, give them the room. If there's too much, let me make it smaller. If the wood's rotting and it's holes all over the place, that all falls on me. So figuring out what that now there are a lot of bees down here, and the Africanized genetics, they just did you see that video I talked about? The walk away.
I looked just briefly. I
I
didn't
should have
watch the
told you
whole thing.
skipped like the first minute 40, and
Yeah, I
then you'll
watched
see
like
when
some of your. I watched one about the vacuum, about how you were designing the vacuum and everything, or when you were trying to come up with a name for it. But but what you're saying about the bees kind of being bothered and becoming aggressive, I've heard that. I've heard that that can be a reason that they are defensive when people go to work them. But here at my yard, I have so many skunks and raccoons and possums that some mornings when I go out to let the chickens out and I walk around my yards, you can see where they not only scratch the front of the hive, but they even scratch the ground in front of it. It's all scratched. The grass is all gone. There's a big pile of chewed up bees there, and I've never seen them be mean after that. Like I still would work them the same day. Just I don't wear a suit most of the time. I just wear a mosquito net over my head. I don't know. I wonder if mine are just a little different because they've definitely been attacked by things. I've never seen that mite pressure causes bees to become mean or beetles. I've had plenty of colonies with thousands of beetles in them, hive beetles, and they're just as easy to work as any bees. But I did have one that was really, really mean. It was mean like 2 years ago, and I tried to kill it last year. I took every drop of honey they had, and I threw an empty box on top of them and closed them up in like October, and they survived the winter like two more times. So
So
this year I ended up splitting them up a bunch of times, and now that all the daughters are perfectly fine to work all the way up till I could go work them tomorrow if I wanted to.
there's a
Um,
comment from Mr. Jim who said, I'd get murdered if I tried to work my bees without a suit. And that's how things are here. And I'll use examples of I've learned I have to change some of my equipment. From the bottom, I wear the white, they're called shrimp boots. You can find them at Walmart for 20 or 30 bucks. Bees go after darker colors. But with the white boots, I don't get as many ankle stings as I used to because they'd get in there, they'd crawl down, and they'd nail you where they can. The biggest thing for me, especially doing removals, I started like everyone with the leather goat skin gloves. You can easily work in them. They're great. They're wonderful. And then I'd sweat. And the entire glove would be just soaking wet. And this part of the back of my hand, there would and I wouldn't exaggerate, there might be 200 stings on each hand. And I tell you, probably 10% of them make it through because that leather gets thinner the more the wetter it gets. And I haven't used leather gloves in years. Go down to Harbor Freight, and they've got I think it's made for examining the back end of a bull, but they've got these blue gloves that come up to your shoulder practically, and they're called PVC gloves. They're like $8, and that's pretty much exclusively what I use. It's not near as textile friendly. I'm not going to be able to pick up a queen wearing those things.
Yeah.
But I probably get 2% of the stings compared to leather gloves. And another thing is, and you know this, when you're doing removals, you're always getting honey coated. And those gloves, they're just not made to really take the honey. Well, what I'll do is I'll have a bucket of water, about half filled with water, and whenever I get the honey all over my gloves, I just dunk them in the bucket, rinse off real quick, shake, and I'm good to go. It hasn't affected the glove or anything. And they make different companies make different colors and styles of those gloves, but I really like the PVC gloves because the bees, while they can land on it, if it's a leather glove, their instinct is to sting. And something I tell people, not only am I protecting myself and other people and animals, when I go to work the bees, I'm also trying to protect the bees. And if I'm killing, 500 bees just stinging my suit, my body, when I go out and work them, I'm not really being a good beekeeper. So having equipment that doesn't have that leather, which the bees naturally want to sting, significantly increases their numbers, their survivorship, and so forth.
Yeah. Have you ever worked bees in the north at all, like this area, Pennsylvania, or yeah, you'd be in heaven then because I couldn't imagine wearing all
No.
that stuff to do a removal, all those gloves and boots.
Oh,
No, I
it's
wear
hot and miserable.
shorts and a
I do.
t-shirt. That's it.
I've done removals. I remember one time, and I'm not a skinny man. I joke that, I'm not just fat. This is called survival because I've taken hundreds and hundreds of stings, in a day doing a removal as I was learning. But I had a friend that was out of town for a long, long time, and I went and took care of her bees, and they were all really gentle Italian-ish type bees. And to me, it was just freaky weird. I mean, I've done removals where you can tell they're Italians, and they are not trying to sting you. To me, it's like these bees have smoked pot. They're wanting some brownies, and they are absolutely worthless. That's what's weird to me. The colonies that come after me, that's what tells me this colony is alive. They are defending their home, and they're going to drive away the invaders. That's what they're supposed to do. I think that's the proper behavioral traits of what the bees should be doing, if that
Yeah, I
makes
mean
sense.
that's cool that you like that. I know that a lot of beekeepers don't like that. They want them to be so calm and docile that they can hold them up to their bare face and blow on them and push their fingers against them. I mean, I don't mind defensive bees. I don't know. I definitely don't want the ones where you just can't see out of your veil. For me, a mosquito net. But even the one that I tried to kind of kill or starve to death a couple years ago, I could deal with them. It's just that where I had them, they were stinging people that were 100 yards away. It was on a farm, but there was like a tree nursery like 500 yards away, and they were stinging customers all the way over there. So that wasn't good. So I had to bring them home.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
and some of this was just the learning experience. For instance, when I only had, I don't know, 5-10 hives, and I was still learning, and my hives were maybe 50, 80 feet away from my chicken coop. And one time I had a hive. It must have been a queen and 2 or 3 daughters because they were exploding. I couldn't give them enough room. They had ready 4 or 5 boxes, and I'd gone and I was doing something with them, and I realized I just walked away. They were too much in my face. Walked away, came back 10, 15 minutes later, and there was 10, 12 dead chickens. they had, gone and I got the chickens that were left and, threw them inside the shop, and some of them ended up blind. But the bees just went on a wild rampage.
Hmm.
And I've realized, okay, these are not Italians. They need some space. And the worst thing with the meaner colonies is let them go hungry and let them get crowded. When they start getting crowded, it's like grasshoppers turning into locusts. It just becomes Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of a transformation. And this is something that, especially for younger people, okay, I'm going to pick on young people. They are not challenged in life. They're not made, they're not going to wars. I mean, what we have for wars today is nothing like World War II. To really prove out their valor. Well, come work some bees with me. And I tell people the first time you come out, you have two goals. One, don't go running away screaming like a little girl. And two, don't pee on yourself. If you can achieve those two things and stick around, that I'm going to call that a success first time. But, in terms of building up nerves of steel, when you hear 50,000, 100,000 bees in the air, and you're shaking your veil to be able to see well, and no matter what you do with the suit, they're going to nail you somewhere. It's not uncommon to walk away with 5 or 10 stings, even fully suited, the PVC gloves and everything. But that's one way to build character. Now, yeah, it hurts a little bit. Well, guess what? Playing football hurts a little bit too. And down here, honestly, I'll take 10 or 20 bee stings, 30 bee stings over one fire ant bite. I hate fire. Matter of fact, my biggest problem for my bees is the fire ants down here, because they just voraciously attack, and they've got even greater numbers than the bees have. So using things like tanglefoot and other type of barriers is what I have to do. But I think I lose more bees to fire ants than probably anything else, as a other than splits that didn't take, that type of thing.
Yeah, I've never been anywhere where I've even seen a fire ant before. We have ants too. We have these little tiny ones that like to make nests under your inner cover, and they're kind of annoying, but they don't really cause problems.
Yeah, you have no idea what fire ants. Be grateful for not having them.
Well, we have both. We have what do you call them? The cow killer velvet ant here.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's not
actually a
really.
wasp. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really an ant, so you don't see a whole bunch of them. You just see like I've actually never seen one, but I've seen pictures that people have posted locally that, oh, what do you call this? What is this weird looking ant? And I'm just like, holy man, don't touch that thing. But I've heard their sting is pretty bad too.
Yeah.
But I've never seen those. But so to do removals with those kind of bees, you absolutely have to use a vacuum Bee Vac for that, right? You can't do it like the way I do it.
Oh, well, yeah, and I've got one here. I'll show you in a second. But when I actually started with a guy from the local club, and he's like, "You want to learn about bees?" He was doing a water meter removal. So I'm like, "Oh, cool." So I went out there, and in 1 second there was 2 bees in the air, and he took off the top of that water meter, and literally in 3 seconds we went from 2 bees to 10 or 15, and you felt the air pulsing with their wing beat. It was scary but thrilling, and you might call it one of those like thrill seekers, people that jump off of cliffs. You can compare it to that to some degree, but I can do that as a fat old man. And so when you're doing removals, you've got 2 things. You got the bees and you got the comb. Comb's easy to get. And when I started, I did like everyone else. You get your hive body, you make a top and bottom. You've got a shop vac, extension cords to the moon or a generator, and a little flap you use to adjust. That worked, but I'm an engineer, and I sat down and I said, after using it a bunch of times, while I loved it, I also absolutely hated it. And so, one day I finally just threw it aside and I said, I'm an engineer. I can make something better than this. And it took several months, but I finally, had a design that worked. That was called Gen 1. And then a year or so later, I turned around and did major redesign, have a Gen 2, and now it's 2.5. And this is it's a 7-gallon bucket. It's got a gate valve where your hose goes. But the key to it's this top part. And again, I'm an electrical engineer. Things can run on batteries. And when you're doing removals, you always have cordless tools because you probably don't have power. And then you curse about your vacuum because you have to plug it in. But the top part of this is where the brains are. You've got a battery, you've got the motor, and you've got a control board. And so you can have, if you can hear that, so that's about the normal speed I run it at. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. What's nice with the vac is, especially when I'm teaching, I'm teaching someone how to do removals, we can still have a conversation without having to yell at each other over the vacuum. And then when I'm taking the bees back, with the variable speed, I'll just put it on the lowest speed, and that moves just a whisper of air. It keeps the bees from overheating. It keeps them from suffocating inside. And, it'll run for, probably a day or two at that lower speed. At the vacuuming speed, I tell most people, I guarantee you'll get 6 hours of runtime. Most people get 8 hours of runtime on a single charge. And it's a lithium-ion battery, so it's rechargeable. And then for guys, I call them my undiagnosed insane friends. These guys, they're professional removers. They're doing 3, 4, 5 removals a day, which, man, after the first 2, I'd drop dead. But God bless.
It takes me 2 days to do an easy one.
And but I tell everyone with the vac, you save half an hour to an hour on every removal compared to the assembly of all the pieces.
I was turned off of Bee Vacs very early in messing with bees. I used a Bushkill vac, I think it was, that a friend of mine bought. Big fancy thing, and it sucked the bees right into the box, and it could have had to do with my inexperience, because I think I sucked up too much honey and debris, because it was in a really old building in a soffit, and I think I sucked a lot of wood and stuff into the thing, but it was so bulky, and I was on it was a 3-story building, so the hose was like forever long, and the cords we had to run everywhere. It was such a mess. Yeah. I never used a vacuum since that day. That was probably, I don't even know when that was. That was maybe,
I tell folks, when you've one cool thing is like swarms, because this thing's the absolute best at swarms. Don't need extension cords. Usually from when I open my truck door to get out, if I start talking, I joke, I say, don't talk to me for 2 minutes. If you don't have 2 hours to talk to me about bees, just walk away. Act like you don't know me. But if I'm not talking, I can get out of my truck, close the door, 10 minutes later, get in my truck, close the door, and I'll have all but 3 of the bees in the vacuum. Because of the variable speed. Now I've got a little nozzle that, if you can see, let me open this up. So normally when you're sucking up bees, this is a short nozzle, and I've got a long one. But when I'm doing swarms, pull the nozzle off, and I just go straight into the hose. And with that, I can suck up 3,000 to 5,000 bees in 30 seconds. And
see, I would be concerned sucking a swarm up, just because if they're so full of honey, I know that bees do vomit when they're put under stress, and I've seen some disasters of people who have used homemade Bee Vacs, which are not similar in the convenience of yours, but similar concept. They're sucking them carefully through the hose into a bucket with a soft landing, and still they're dead anyway. They're just in a big pile of honey by the time they get them home. Does that happen for you, sucking up swarms?
So I've never had a honey problem with swarms. The inside of my hose is smooth, and my hose is only 7 feet long. I mean, the whole vacuum weighs about 10 pounds. So, and it's got a backpack, so you can actually carry it on your back as you're going up ladders and so forth. But because I don't have the long hose and I don't need the excessive pressure because I've got the speed control, I've, unless I've been cut and comb and just the bees are coated with honey before I start, I've never had an issue with bees vomiting as they go down the hose
Yeah.
and causing that kind of a clog. So a lot of that has to do with these other ones, because they're using a shop vac. They've got so much vacuum pressure. You've got to release most of it, but it still causes a lot of stress for the bees, and all the vibration and the noise. I mean, all of that panics the bees. Part of what
Yeah.
I do is keep the bees calm through the process.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
But and then if you're carrying it as a backpack, this is a remote, so this side plugs into the vacuum, and then you got your speed control where normally I just clip it on my shirt, and I'm just doing that. So having done so many removals over the years, I've made a lot of changes to the design. Even this past year, for instance, I found a lighter colored hose, because in Texas I've always had a black hose. It was a really good quality, but in the sun it gets hot. Well,
Yeah.
lighter color will help with that.
Yeah, I've had a couple situations where a vacuum would have come in really, really handy, just because the way the bees will kind of sneak over into a corner where you can't really. It's just a pain to get them out. So or you move them with some Bee Quick, and then they just go somewhere else, or you get them, you smoke them out, and they all fly around for like 5 minutes, and then they all land back in the same spot. So that could definitely. I've reconsidered trying to use a vacuum again for just certain situations. Like for swarms, I just love shaking swarms into a box or shaking them onto a little sheet or the lid, and letting them walk into the box. I don't mind coming back later. I don't do that many removals. I do a ton of swarm removals, but I don't travel that far. I'm definitely not doing 3 or 4 every day. So, but yeah, something like that could definitely come in handy, in certain situations. But yeah, that first time using that big Bee Vac where it sucked it right into the box, it was just a big mess. They absconded the next day. They were gone.
I joke that my best customers are guys that have used other vacs, because you see how horrible they are. Then you use this and you think you've gone to heaven. So yeah, it makes and I tell a lot of people, and this is so true, where doing removals with the old design was just work. You're carrying all this stuff back and forth and putting it together. It brought a lot of the fun back to doing removals, plus making it just so much less physical work. So yeah, it's I gosh, I sell a ton of these things. And I'm trying to work with a lot of smaller storefronts, beekeeping stores, where I can sit here and tell everyone, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's a video and it's a sales pitch. Great. But when you walk into a small store and they've got one there and you can pick it up and feel the weight and feel the different suction levels and really talk to the guy, and he tells you, yes, you will get 6 hours or plus run time. So a lot of stores now are starting to do rentals, because if you do 2 removals a year, don't spend $400. But if you have a local store that'll rent it to you cheap, go pick it up, use it, take it back, you're done. You don't have to even
Yeah, that's a
store
good
it.
idea. Or even for bee clubs, you could push it
Yeah.
to not push it, but like suggest it to bee clubs where somebody might use it one time and generate a couple bucks for the club. I mean, I heard about it from watching 628 Dirt Rooster. I've seen him use it many times. So when you told me yesterday, I make the Everything Bee Vac, I knew right away what you were talking about, even though I've never, used one. So that was pretty cool.
And what I find, I don't have as I'm getting older, I can't see, I can't hear, but thank God I can still drive. But keep in mind, our queens are moving, and they're moving fast down here. I can't find queens. Now, if I'm going through a hive, yeah, I might find her occasionally. When I'm doing a removal, she's running. And I never even, I don't know how many queen cages I've bought, broken and replaced. I don't even know where one is now. When I'm doing a removal, if I see the queen, I just put her in the vacuum. I'm not worried about her getting hurt or having any issues with the colony. In fact, I joke that on top is this is the exhaust port. I call that my queen indicator. When I've got 200 bees on top of the vacuum around that exhaust port, that tells me I got the queen inside because your pheromones are getting thrown out.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that happen. Not with myself, but I've seen it on videos.
Yeah.
So you're very involved in your local group, right? You were telling me about how you do presentations, or how do you have like a title at your group? Are you the president or anything, or just?
No, I mean, we're not organized enough to really have titles and jobs and things. Um, I am, oh gosh, probably 90% of the time, I'm the one leading the group, doing the presentation. Something I do with my club, and I can't encourage enough other clubs to try the same thing, is in springtime, we used to have 2 meetings a month. So March, April, May, we'd have, two separate meetings because there's just so much going on in the hives. Well, a year or two ago, I turned it around. I said, let's just have one meeting. And then I'm going to do a second, we'll call it a field trip. And, I'll just pick one of my bee yards, give them the address, and we'll go out there and we'll do splits. Or we'll do, name your spring activities, the splits, the adding supers, the whatever. And, I'd sit there and I'd say, okay, here's how you do the split. And here's my way. For my splits, I like to use all medium boxes because I've got a bad back already. I'd like to be able to keep walking. And literally, if I have 3 boxes, I'll make sure all 3 boxes have some eggs and brood, and I'll just split them 3 ways. Each box becomes its own colony. Queen is in one of them. I don't care which. The other 2 will make queens, and I've got 3 colonies. I'll show the group my method, and then who wants to do one? And this person and that person and the other person, everyone gets to go and do their own split. So, because I can't tell you how many times people have said to me in the last couple of years, I was afraid of doing splits. And I tell them, to get the genetics you want, you've got to split your own colonies. Because otherwise, unless you find the perfect person to buy them from. And, people come and say, I was afraid to do a splits. We did them at your yard. And then we went back a month or so later, and they got to see the results of the splits. And they're like, I was able to go and do, my 4 splits this year and so forth.
Well, I hear that exact same thing here. I have people that would come and get bees from me, and they do great with them. They overwinter, and then in April they call me and they're saying, I'd like to get some more bees from you. And I'm like, oh shit, did they die? Like, is it? Oh no, they made it. I just want to have more bees. I'm like, well then why don't you can just split them? I mean, you should be able to make easily 3 colonies right away, in a couple weeks. I'm begging people to not buy bees off me just so I can make sure that all these other people get bees. And yeah, you wouldn't be surprised, but it's a ton of people who have bees that overwinter are ready to explode in the spring, and they just don't know what to do. So I end up trying to show them as many as I can, but a lot of times it just ends up hanging up in a tree somewhere 50 feet up, and they can't get it. But
yeah,
I'm trying. I've talked a lot of people out of buying bees from me this upcoming spring again, just to first see if they make it, and if they don't, then yeah, you could get some more. But I just try to encourage people to catch their own bees. Come to me as a last resort because I really like what I have. I kind of hate parting with a lot of it sometimes.
And down here, I mean, I've not done the actual counting, but there have been studies done that your meaner colonies, call them Africanized, whatever, they produce 30% more honey and they produce 30% more bees on average. And I think the more bees is because, when you have 2 or 3 queens laying, your colony's exploding. When you have that many more bees, well, of course, you're going to get more honey. So, people are like, oh, you don't want the mean ones. And I say, they're going to be your most productive. They're going to be your most resilient. And, why do you want to do all this work for, keeping, there's a joke I like that goes like, tomato plants. from the moment you put the seed in the pot, you start the hospice care. And when you have these really wimpy colonies that just can't make it on their own, you're living 24/7 hospice care. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
just
that's
not fun.
I've made that comparison myself too. They're just on life support like the whole time. Yeah, and you're there just holding their hand. I could never do it. I don't know how people do it. But I just thought of a question I had. You said that you use foundation in with your bees. Do you use plastic foundation? What size cells do you use? I'm just curious because I've
Oh,
heard that
okay.
Africanized bees are smaller, but if you're using, say, right cell or standard man lake,
Yeah,
then they're
yeah,
not
I've
small.
got, for the most part, I've used standard man lake plastic. Um, I know honestly, I don't mean, I think they're just what I'd call standard cell. Like I said, I like to have at least one, maybe two frames with no foundation. And something I find, and this is really interesting, if for a couple of years when I could get more of the foundationless frames, I would alternate plastic foundation, no foundation, plastic, no. And, one colony would completely ignore the plastic and do everything draw their own. The next colony ignores the foundationless and do everything off the plastic. Um, I know one year I had a frame that a medium sized standard frame. It weighed 10.5 pounds. They had drawn it out so far with the honey. Um,
Well, the plastic frames you use, are they with the wooden frame with the plastic
yes.
foundation
Yeah, the
insert?
plastic.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and they're the
With
black
the
ones?
all
Are they black?
I prefer the black because I can't see that well. It's easier to see the larva inside.
Yeah. Okay. So
Um,
those are 5.2 millimeters. So they're definitely not small. And so that means that you actually have large Africanized bees. So the whole benefit to what some of my detractors would say, Africanized bees do better with mites because they're much smaller and plus their aggression, but they're not. They're actually way bigger than my bees.
yeah.
Um, a lot of mine. I mean, when I do use foundation, I mostly have the small, what they call small cell, but it's not really small. It's just smaller, and
Uh-huh.
then a lot of my foundationless frame cells are well below 4.9. They're 4.6, 4.5. So I have very very tiny bees, and some of those still die. So it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter.
The other thing I'm guilty of is I don't really swap out the foundation and clean it off like I should. So I wouldn't be surprised if my average foundation's been in the hives 3, 4 years, and it gets tough and dark, and every time a bee emerges, that cell gets a tiny bit smaller. So while I might have standard 5.2 millimeter, I suspect a lot of those are 4.8 just because of time. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess I ought to switch those out. But yeah, I don't fret that too much.
That's cool.
Um,
Yes, I mean, yeah, it definitely. I always like to have an answer when somebody makes a claim about something. So it helps me to have these answers.
yeah.
That you
And,
have
and,
you have those bees a little bit bigger, and even in Africa, the bees died from mites. But you're down there doing it without treatments and having even much higher survival than me. But for me, I mean, people who watch this channel a lot or listen to me have already heard me say it 1,000 times, but if I were to lose half my bees or even 3/4 of them, it's not a big deal to bounce back from that.
yeah, I
I
mean,
smooth.
a couple of years ago when I lost the 20, whatever it was, 20% or so, it was, when the springtime came around, the survivors were so incredibly less time consuming because, trying to keep 80 colonies and running a business, I don't have a lot of time to go babysit bees. Um, and the colonies that I had, splits all took off. It was a whole lot more fun than having to, doing CPR on the colonies every other week. Um, um, and now one thing you mentioned, you've got 50 hives in one yard. Down here, there's just not enough of a nectar flow to support anywhere near that. Most of my yards are more like 5, maybe 10 colonies, And that's something I found is the meaner the colonies, the less they like being in groups. They don't want 50 or 20 even colonies nearby. Um, and things I'll do is, so if I've got a bench with, let's say, 5 colonies lined up, I'll alternate. One faces that way, the next faces back. Alternate which way their entrance is, which makes them feel twice as spacious. And a lot of people are like, well, you don't want to approach a colony from the entrance side. Keep in mind, my girls aren't. Something I joke and I say is, I hate dumb bees. And I find the most gentle ones also tend to be the dumbest. If I walk around the back of the hive, rip the top off of it, and the bees haven't figured out that something's going on, they're a whole new level of dumb. They could run to be a political person. Whereas with my girls, I walk up to the front, I block their entrance, I do what I'm doing, and honestly, they're no meaner or more angry than going from the backside or the side. Or I've had bees that you get your smoker going, and there's different levels of being upset. The highest level I've seen, I'll have the smoker, and the bees use it as a thank you message. I'll set the smoker aside, and I will see bee after bee. They will actually fly into the smoker. They're trying to kill the smoker by flying into it. That's kind of the ultimate we are unhappy mode mindset. And that's when the time, okay, throw the smoker out. It's not helping with anything. And there's times when they're in a mood that says, not today. Go back, and it's amazing. I'll go and try and work a colony on Monday, and they are absolutely insane. And you know what? Okay, girls, we'll deal with this. I'll come back on Tuesday or Wednesday. Weather hasn't changed, same time of day, and I'll open up the hive, and they're like they've been smoking pot. They're like, hey, dude, how you doing? I don't know what's changed. I've got a theory. You have 50,000 sisters living under the same roof with their mother, and they're good-for-nothing brothers. They're going to have bad temperament days. And I think that's what some of those days work out to be. I tell people when you go into the hive, be absolutely prepared for war. Protect yourself. Plan for war. Pray for peace, but be prepared for the worst. I remember one guy, he'd gotten some hives, and I told him, every time you open a hive, full suit gloves, do it. And he had just gotten his hives. A day or two later, he's wanting to know if the bees were in there. So he goes and he lifts up one of the lids. He got stung 25 times on his hands because he didn't bother putting on gloves. There is not just a quick look or something like that. You've got to prepare for what the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, you guys can keep that down there. Yeah, I want nothing to do with that. An occasional one here and there, that's fine. But if that's every single colony, they just want to tear you apart. Yeah, I'm good.
But it's not. It varies by the day, and it varies. I mean, there is a temperament range. I've got my favorite bee yard is the one that's a mile from any human being, and those girls are 80% of the time, yes, going to tear you up. But even compared to my other yards, I probably get 30 to 50% more honey per hive compared to any other yard, any other location.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? I've only got to go there half a dozen times a year. Yeah, I think for me it is.
Yeah, I find that. I mean, it's pretty commonly known, but for me, the only time I'm really dealing with any type of defensiveness and things like that is during a dearth period, when it's dandelions everywhere and honeysuckles blooming everywhere. You don't need anything. You don't even need a smoker. They could care less about anything you're doing in there. You can pop the lid off really loud, and you're just not going to get stung. I mean, unless you squeeze one under your arm. But I guess down there it doesn't matter, like how strong the flow is, right? They're still going to be upset.
Yeah, well, like I said, it varies, day by day as to what's going on. But there are absolutely, like I said, that one yard, you pretty much know you're going to go to war when you go in there. But I something I explain to folks. People think, oh, the bees are just mean, and really, it's the exact opposite. The bees are defending their hive. They love their colony. They love their queen. They're trying to protect their family. Just like if someone broke in your front door and you'd go and grab a gun and defend your home. Some people say, oh, you're being violent. No, you're trying to protect your children, your siblings, or whoever. And that's what these bees are doing. So, understanding where they're coming from, some giant has ripped the roof off their house and they're afraid mama's going to get killed. So they're going in defense mode. But what's great about those colonies is you go there, you give them supers, you go there, you take the supers off, you go there, you do this bunch of splits, and then you do the splits. You just don't have to. And if you, and this will sound weird. And have you ever heard of a group called Hives for Heroes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's Hives for Heroes and there's Heroes for. There's a couple similar ones, but yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Okay. I think these guys started out of Houston, and what's fascinating about this group, the idea is you take soldiers who have PTSD issues, and they basically want to kill themselves, and you pair them up with a beekeeper, and the beekeeper teaches them beekeeping for a season, for a year, and at the end of the year, the beekeeper gives the soldier a colony so he can go and start his own apiary. And different people do it different ways. I laugh because my approach is, I think, a little bit unique. I bring the soldier in and I explain to him, here's how you stay alive. You suit up. Here's how, understand they're trying, you think they're being mean? They're just defending their homes. It's a very simple mindset.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think they're being mean. Yeah, they're not mean bees. They're just, they're like any animal that you go into their, their home.
Go in their den, they're going to defend it. But where I laugh about it is, if a soldier wants to go and hurt themselves, you really can't be in that mindset and also be in the mindset that says, okay, I'm going to do what I can to stay alive. You're going to pick one or the other. Because, you can go into one of my yards and I can pretty much guarantee you are going to die if you go unprotected and you throw open all the hives. But the soldiers suddenly learned that, wait, when this drumbeat of 50,000 bees is all around me, and you know the sound difference between happy bees and angry bees. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah. So the more high pitched sound is like when you're about to get lit up.
It's more powerful, and you're standing in the middle of that. It is an awesome experience. You look around and say, and I tell people, if you don't believe in God, come work bees with me for a year. And after that year, there's no way you can believe that evolution is possible.
Do you want to get into that? We can get into that.
Okay, well, that's another discussion. I'm happy to have.
We can go for hours on that.
Well, I mean, when we look at how the queen lays and the workers and the whole social structure, it can't happen by accident. But with soldiers, they come into this experience and they realize you can live at peace while there's chaos around you. And you can choose to absorb their chaos, or you can choose to exude love. And it sounds kind of weird. It sounds, 60s hippie-ish. But there is a lot to that. I've had some guys that just, it does change their lives to a degree. And their vision of, when you're a soldier in a foreign country, you don't know behind what tree someone's going to pop out and try and kill you. When you go in the bee yard, you know exactly who's trying to kill you and how they're trying to kill you. And they're not doing it out of anger. They're doing it out of love for their family. And that brings a whole different perspective on all of this.
See, for me, my fascination with selection and evolution actually is what makes me enjoy beekeeping so much, especially treatment-free beekeeping, beekeeping without treatments, because it's a demonstration of selection and evolution right in front of your eyes. Like, um, you can't on one side say things don't, traits don't get passed down to future generations in a
Absolutely.
certain way, and say Italians act like this and Carniolans act like this, because there you have two distinct separate subspecies of the same thing. It's evolution selection right in front of your face, and that's how you can go from a yard of 100 colonies down to 20, and then back to 40, back to 60, back to 80, through absolute selection happening in real time that you can see. So that's what I find fascinating about it. um,
There's the. Are you familiar with the microevolution versus macroevolution?
I'm familiar with that assertion. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. It's all evolution. I mean, we're going off on a different subject, which is fine with me, but because I'm very versed in it. But yeah, you can. It's all it's all evolution. I mean, yeah, there's you're talking about adaptations compared to from say a monkey to a human. There's two separate
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Or the
yeah.
separation of say different finches on the Galapagos Islands that have been separated over hundreds of thousands of years compared to pterodactyls evolving down to birds. Yeah, it's two separate things. But what about it?
I'll even. I don't. My belief is the Earth is only about 6,000 years old. I mean, I'm a true literal
Oh, yeah.
Bible guy.
Okay. Well, man,
But
that's a conversation for my other channel. But okay, yeah. Um,
but
I don't know what
yeah,
to say.
well, that's another whole long conversation, and I'm happy to have that conversation. In terms of when I look at the bees, um, there's no way that a chicken laying an egg now popped a raccoon, or a now you can say that African bees are related to Italians and the different races, and the same thing with people. You know, white, black, Aborigine, Asian, we can all breed with each other. And whether you lived in a hot climate or a cold climate, a climate where you had to defend hard, an example with people. Take two guys, one grew up inner city, and if someone busts in your front door, it's a gangbanger, and you got to shoot back and forth. Versus someone else that grew up in some military barracks, and when they busted in the door, you jumped up and said, "Yes, sir." Um, Two very different reactions, but they could all come from the same background, just eventually um, micro evolve into different things. Now, your raccoon can't breed to, I don't know, a skunk and make babies. Um,
Yeah. I'm not. None of those analogies work at all when describing evolution in any way. If you're talking about just taught behaviors, yeah, there's people and animals will behave in different ways based on many, infinite different things. But no one would ever claim that a chicken would lay an egg that would produce a raccoon. What we're
Actually, there are
saying is that
some.
what we're saying is that all birds are from a common ancestor. All spider. There are 300,000 separate spider species, and there's no way that Noah brought one of every pair onto the ark for today. Kept them separate. I mean, you can look at say honeycomb and say, "Wow, it's so fascinating." Well, here's what I would find fascinating: how did Noah have time to capture 300,000 separate species? He didn't. There was one. There was the spiders came as their own branch off of the evolutionary chain. Were separated by different climates and latitudes and land masses, and became that many separate different spiders who now cannot breed with each other. So the idea that a chicken would lay a raccoon, of course, they can't do that. But a jumping spider cannot even mate with a black widow, even though they're so similar. But they came from the same ancestor spider. And you can go, the exact same thing applies to snakes, birds, flies, bees, everything. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, but we have to deal in credible, realistic analogies. So and macroevolution is definitely not. I mean, microevolution or whatever. It's a common thing to be brought up when someone's talking about young Earth creation versus the fossil record or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely not behavior.
That's way off. That's way off topic for
I love talking about it though. But
yeah, I'm just looking at my notes to see what other things I know I've been talking for a while.
Well, yeah, you had some slides here that you brought up at that. Were there any slides that you think would be interesting to bring up? I can pop them up.
Let me so let me hit on a few points, and I'll skip over the slides, but I'll kind of talk to them. When you've got colonies,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So okay, so when you've got colonies that are, let me check the notes real quick. Okay. So one guy actually said he's got one of my vacs. No, still in the conference call. Sorry, my business partner just walked in. He was wondering what was going on.
Well, I just lady called and said that there's someone over there, and I've been trying to call you, you're not answering the phone.
Yeah, I've been.
So I come over here to shoot you.
Welcome to Texas.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I'm glad it's you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have been on the conference call, which is why I've answered. So, okay.
Next time, answer.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So what else? That was a slight interrupt. Change the topics. Yeah, my phone's been ringing with him calling, and the lady across the street, she kind of watches the business for us. And I came over to the business just so my barking dogs aren't in the background. And I'm sure she's been calling him and saying, "There's somebody in the shop." And I'm not answering the phone because we're having a phone call, our conference. Okay. Anyways, so one of the things I want to talk about is, especially when you start beekeeping, it's actually a running joke. You open up the hive and you realize you forgot the tool. You go get the tool, you get back, and then the smoker went out. You got to go get more fuel. You come back. You actually open the hive, and where did you put your hive tool? I forgot. I was going to feed them. Let me go make. It gets silly. It could be a comical skit. So when you're going to work the bees, have a plan. What is your intent? If for instance, I don't check for mites. I'm not going to do any treatments. So why would I bother doing mite counts? What can I do about it? If it's the time of year when you can't get queens, why do I go and need to look and see if they're queenless? If they are, it's going to be really obvious, and either I'm going to join them with another colony or let them fail. But have a plan for what your goal is before you start. People who start and then, oh yeah, they spend. I joke that I always work with 3 hive tools, because with 3 hive tools, I can always find one. I see you smiling.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth. I've driven all the way to another bee yard and forgot my suit and my smoker,
oh man,
and had everything else. And then they were hanging on the little stand out here. But
yep.
I've definitely done that.
But start with what is my goal. Start with what do I need. Have it prepared. Something I've started telling people is, especially when you have trouble keeping your smoker going. By the way, the best smoker fuel in the world is cow pies. Once you start them up with a blowtorch, and those things burn and burn. They burn slow, a nice cool smoke, and they burn for hours. I've had people, I'm stopped at a light, and the smoker's in the back of the truck, and the people get out of their car and look at my truck and then get mad at me because it's my smoker. They think something's on fire in my truck. But have your plan, have the equipment, have the tools. And when you open a hive, it shouldn't be more than a couple of few minutes. I don't care pretty much anything there's almost nothing I need to do in a hive that'll take more than 3 or 4 minutes. that I need, 10 minutes with an open hive to do stuff. I don't know if you can think of anything that takes that long.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good goal. Sometimes, I mean, just this is here. We're just talking about opinions now. So, because for me, sometimes I do only take 2-3 minutes, and in my opinion, yeah, you shouldn't dabble in there forever. But I've been in a hive for 20 minutes before, just because I don't know. I've never really timed myself, but I know that sometimes I know that there's just one thing I got to check. But for someone like me, I'm not really a great beekeeper, but I do have a lot of colonies. So sometimes I just really don't know if I've even been in one for a while, and I'll kind of walk around. I don't keep records. I'm terrible at keeping records. So sometimes there's a colony sitting there. It looks great, but I just know that doesn't really tell you much all the time. You can see a bunch of pollen going in. The bees look good, but sometimes I'll just be like, yeah, I don't really actually have a plan. I just want to see what's going on. So I will go in there, and sometimes it just takes a while, to see what I want to see and put them back together. And I don't rush. That's another thing. I move slowly. If you watch any of my videos, you'll see these beekeepers yanking frames out trying to be commercial beekeepers, and I don't. I move so slowly. I might kill an average of one bee in 10 inspections. I just don't kill bees. I don't crush queens. I don't make a lot of mistakes just because I move so slowly. And that's kind of, once you have a lot of experience, yeah, you can get in and out fast. But some new people, they have to take their time. And I wouldn't get on them for taking a little bit too much time. That's just me.
Keeping meaner colonies is not really something I recommend for newer beekeepers, though.
Yeah, nah.
And as I've said, the longer the colony is opened up, the more distressed the colony gets. It's just not a natural feel for them. Although I will tell you, I love the smell of the hive. When you open it and there's that, whatever that scent is that comes out of the people that have those masks that are breathing bee colony odor.
Yeah, I've seen
I
that.
would be one of them. I love that smell.
Yeah, I love it too. I mean, this time of year I can smell them just walking around, and I love it. It's just I love that smell too. People who don't keep bees, they don't know about that smell. But yeah, it's good.
Another thing I'll do when I'm done, you talk about taking notes. I'm just like you. I'm horrible. But what I'll do after I've worked the colonies, I'll pull out my cell phone and I'll just start a video and I'll say, okay, and it stays a date and all that information for me. But first colony looks great. Second colony is a dead out. Third colony, I need to split them. Fourth colony, they're a little light. Had to feed them extra. I'll just kind of, what's my quick comment for each of the colonies, and that's my video. So next time I'm going back to that yard, I'll just go and play that video again, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to get an extra super, or that top was rotten, or whatever. And that's my way of, instead of writing things down, because A, I lose paper, B, I can't write with those big fat gloves, and I can't read my writing half the time. So with the video, it tells me the whole story, and I can actually have all of my different yards basically in videos for easy record keeping, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I've recently, I guess over the past season or maybe the season before that, I've adopted kind of this brick placement kind of technique for my brain, just where if it's going from left to right, I know it's a queen right hive. It looks perfect on the last inspection. If I turn it perpendicular to that, maybe it was a split that I have to check for a mated queen. If I stand the brick straight up and down where it's tall, that means it has one last chance on my next inspection to see if there's something, if they're going to do anything, or I'm shaking them out. I have a couple little things I do like that, but it's not perfect.
Yes and no. That works when the hives are all in your backyard.
Yeah.
But when it's 5 miles away, you're not going to remember, oh, I needed an extra top or a bottom or whatever. So, in your backyard, if they're all right there, man, that's the way to go, no question. But I don't have that convenience of, checking my webcam to say, oh yeah, that one's got the vertical brick. I need to go check them. So,
Yeah.
in fact, I have the problem where 3 times this year, I was using a little different, it's called a work platform to hold my hives, and we had some pretty windy days. The good news is I had a strap around the whole thing, and that whole work platform flipped over. So the colony was upside down for half a day or a day or two. And if I didn't have it strapped, that would have ripped open the colony, and they would have really made a mess of things. They would have out trying to sting whatever. But at least with the straps, they stayed together. So just keeping the hives closed, even if they're upside down, definitely makes them a lot gentler overall.
So sorry, I was clearing some spam out of the chat room, but so you said using ratchet straps, is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah, ratchet strap,
Yeah.
and these are those 4-foot wide work platforms, and I can put 2. If I'm in a pinch, I can do 3 hives with the one strap, and the strap holds them all together. And those, gosh, when I bought them, they were $24, and a 3 hive stand for $24 is a bargain to my book. Now they're like 50 some bucks. Oh, and someone asked, fresh cows. I have fun with that. So cow pies, you always want them dry. I found that, yeah, actually somebody honestly asked me that question once. I've also used horse manure. Horse manure, it burns a lot faster. It burns with more smoke, but it just burns too fast for me. I was used to cow pies where, 3 hours later, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I should add some more. But yeah. And matter of fact, I've got some cow pies in the back of my truck, and it rained the other day. So, re-wetting is not a good thing either. I'm going to let that dry.
I don't have access to any of that I know of. Do dog pies work? I mean, that's about all I have access to. And
I would not try those.
Probably not.
I remember reading where some guys, as marijuana has become legal, they've used it in their smokers, and they claim that the bees were calmer. I don't know if that was true that the bees were calmer or if the beekeeper was calmer.
Yeah, he was just okay. Grooving.
Yeah, they're everyone has their own reason for doing. And if in states where it's legal, that's your choice. I'm not a druggie. A few things that I have a list of things never to do. First is always, never risk safety. Yourself, animals, other people, whatever. You always want to do your safety checks, what's going on around you. And I've had dogs, come running up, and a friend of mine last year, he was doing a removal, and he didn't realize the other side of the privacy fence, there was a dog that was chained there. And the colony actually ended up killing the dog, which was a mess, but the homeowner promised him, no, there's no dogs nearby. So he didn't even think about going and checking. Have a plan in place. A lot of times, now this is Texas. So when it's 100, 105 degrees out, someone asked about exercise. I've done removals where I weighed myself beforehand. I do the removal, take a shower, weighed myself, and I'll drink easily a gallon of water. Even with all of that, I'll drop 10 pounds in one big removal. Of course, it all came back, dadgummit, over the next couple of days. I drink more water, rehydrated. But a lot of times I'll leave my truck running with the AC on max, because when the heat gets, I've had heat stroke. When it gets to you, stop what you're doing. Close the hive, get in the truck, take a break. Take 5 minutes, cool off, and then come back. Because that was 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago. It still affects me now and then. I don't have the stamina because of having gone through that once. A couple other things that are on the never-do list. I never go queen hunting. If I see eggs, I see larvae. Well, I can't see eggs anymore. If I see larvae, I know the queen's in there, at least one, if not 2 or 3. I'm done. I don't need to see her and say, oh, look, she still has a white dot. I really work to not let them go hungry. Bees that have a bit of a temper, I know when I get hungry, I turn mean to her. So my bees do the same thing. I try not to let them get down to, near starvation mode. Mean colonies are really tough to requeen. For a lot of people, it's better to sell the colony or trade it to someone, and as opposed to, especially with the Africanized genetics, I've known people that have tried to introduce 3 queens, and one after another, the bees just kill them. They'll let her lay some eggs, they'll kill her, and try and make a new queen. The person removes the swarm cells, puts in a new queen, they let her lay eggs, they kill her, repeat cycle. There's just something, I don't know if it's a pheromones or what it is, but it's, at least with the more Africanized genetics, it's a real trick to try to, and I've got 1 or 2 friends who are really good at doing these introductions, but it takes, a friend of mine actually wrote his master's thesis on managing Africanized bees, and he wrote it back around 1990 when he was living in South America. So he had the worst of the genetics, and that was his master's thesis in college. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so from what you're saying is a clear example of how people do just very different things. People do their own thing. Like for me, I'm not necessarily a queen hunter when I go into bees, but in the springtime, especially, the first warm ups, when I see who my survivors are, which, and then out of those, my very favorite ones, which are the ones that go back 7-8 years, the exact same line of bees, I want those queens marked. Like I want them, every single one of them, a different color that lets me know these are the ones that are from the forest, from 2016. These are the ones from the railroad tracks in 2017. So, and I want them marked, and I gotta find them, because if they just so happen to end up hanging in a tree, and I find that queen, I can still keep track of that line of bees. I won't really care so much about the ones that I just caught as a swarm, last year, and they made it. That's not uncommon. Most of the garbage will just winter will take care of them, but I do look for queens sometimes, and then sometimes, but not. Once I have all the splits off of them and daughters and everything, I don't necessarily track them as well. I don't mark all of them. And what was the other thing you said about not looking for queens? But the other one was about feeding. Feeding, yeah. I mean, I don't really have too many colonies starve here. If they do, it's over winter, but usually they'll get robbed before that. So yeah, I don't really have too much of that. Yeah, I don't know. One thing big with me, you know what my thing to never do is? Never say never, or never say always when it comes to bees, because just about anything you say never this or never that, not with actions, but more like if you say the queens never do this or the drones always do that, it only takes one example to make you completely false, and to where you can never say that again. But yeah, there are some things you shouldn't do. Definitely shouldn't do. But for me, none of them.
You're right.
None of them apply to beekeeping. They apply to safety, probably.
Yeah. If the never say never, you're right. There you will find exceptions. You want to absolutely minimize those exceptions.
Yeah.
You're right. There may be a time when, okay, I've got to be in this hive for 15 minutes because whatever I'm doing, I'm teaching. Okay. And when you're teaching, you can't be the 2-minute in and out thing. And, I really try never to take queens out of hives, but showing people and doing things, you're right. There will be exceptions, but you want to absolutely minimize, some of these. Another thing for me is thumping the hives. People put their hive tool down, they drop the brick. If something in my home made my whole home vibrate, that happened once. My walls, I've got ICF, so my walls are a foot thick and it's 6-inch concrete in the middle. About 10, 15 years ago, my whole house shook. And I go outside and I see this mushroom cloud next door. And I've got 30 acres. And I call up my neighbor and I was like, hey, Paul, what you doing? Well, they were shooting tannerite and they had blown up a whole canister of it. And so this is over 1,000 feet away. And, it rattled the house. Well, same thing with the bees. When you go and you drop something on top, it shakes everything. And they're going to come out and call the neighbors and say, hey, what's going on? And if they're not friendly to start with, that's not a way to make them friendlier.
Yeah, so, it's funny you say that because I know of a guy, real numbnuts who gets down in front of his hive and just bangs on it like he's knocking on the door, and it's like this kind of macho, goofy way to show. I don't know what it shows, but it's one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. And I laugh about it every time I see it. And it's just funny you say that because, people who've been doing it for a while know that, what's idiotic and what isn't. And yeah, to me, banging on a hive like you're the cops knocking on a door with a search warrant is really silly.
Yeah. I've got a slide or two of what I call the good news. So, if the bees have an attitude, I don't worry about blocking their entrance when I'm working the colony. I don't worry about bad weather setting them off. I don't worry about how well they're doing. They're kicking butt. I don't worry about mites, small hive beetles, wax moths. I'm not worried about. And another pet peeve of mine is, when I come, let's say I came and visited you in your home, it would be really weird if I didn't like your furniture arrangement and rearrange your furniture, right? Well, when I open up a hive and I see Burcomb and different things, the bees they didn't put it there by accident. They intentionally did the work to do these different things. Why is it my responsibility to scrape? I'll see guys that they sit there and they scrape every top of every frame to get all that Burcomb off. Well, come back next week, they're going to put it back. I wasted my time. I ticked them off. I made them do a bunch of work that they didn't want to have to do again. And what's the point? If they want their brood on the left side towards the back, and they're going to have Burcomb on frame 3 and 5, God bless those bees. Let them arrange their home their way. Now, okay, we all have our entertaining goofball stories. One time, I put a box on top, and you remember I said I do alternating foundationless, foundationless?
Yeah,
this was 10
checkerboarding.
Yeah. This was 10 frames with no foundation. And if it's orientated this way, they built their comb at about a 30-degree angle. So every piece of comb was across 5 frames. Yeah. Almost every problem we find in the hive is this guy's fault. And, that was a creative, how am I going to, I had to just take the whole box and just rip it all apart. There is no salvaging mess ups like that. But other than that, because you can't look at anything in that situation, but other than that type of situation, let them have their arrangement. If there's 2 frames that have a big bridge between them, you can go in there and remove it, and they're going to rebuild it. And I said I have, when I use plastic foundation, in the last few years, I've realized, due to the lack of the very short nectar flow, I'll take the plastic and I roll a thick layer of wax on there, and the bees absolutely love it. And there's people that say bees don't move wax. I can tell you without a doubt, I'll have boxes that I've put the heavy wax on. I'll have them sitting in the back of the truck, and I'll go and look, and there's 200 bees in there, and you can see where they've chewed up the wax, and they're taking that wax back home with them. And you can see it in their legs, kind of like they store pollen. They'll store the wax in their baskets for taking back home.
I see that this time of year in my bee barn. I have a lot of, a whole bunch of frames with propolis and comb, stored, and there's bees in there, and they fly into my barn right through the window, take off little pieces. I got pretty close-up videos of some of them. They pack it on their little legs and take it out of there.
Yeah.
I've had someone tell me that the bees won't remove pollen and from cells and fly it to another colony, but I have a video of them doing that too. So it's pretty cool, you know. And it was somebody who said they never do this, and I've had someone tell me they never forage on some plant. I forget what it was. And don't tell me the bees don't that they never do that thing, because then I spent the next couple of days just camped out at a patch of whatever plant that was, and there were bees on it. They were working it. Had to get it on video.
Yep.
Yeah.
And another thing I'll give people is, the first times you're working a meter colony, it helps to have two people. And actually, one person, their only job is manning the smoker. Because I'm sure you've seen this. When a colony decides that we hate you and we're coming after you, you see 500 heads pop up, and they're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, charge. If you get there half a second after charge, it's too late. They're all over. Whereas if the one person's sitting there with the smoker, when they count 1, he's doing puff, and he completely turns them around. They go back down, and the war doesn't start. So if you're worried about working them, one person with the smoker, the other person doing the work, and that makes for a much safer and calmer inspection, whatever you're doing with the bees that day. So I was going to throw that out. Oh, another thing I'll do, and this is kind of fun, is I've built a obstacle course at my house, and it's where things were sitting. Whenever I do removals, I always take them home and I leave them there for a couple days. And not a couple days. I usually leave them there for a few months just to make sure they're going to do reasonably well and so forth. I'm a huge fan of jail time, so when I do a removal, I don't let them. I'll take the bucket. I put the hive body on top, and I have to show you another time how I do that. But I'll give them a feeder. But they've got their brood. They've got a gallon of sugar water, and they're in a shady spot. So I want them to take 2 days, be in jail, attach any of the wax that's in there, and decide that, okay, we give up. This is home. Too many times when I started, I'd open up the hive, and within an hour, they're gone. But if the jail time, it helps them convince, okay, this is where we're living. So I'll have those in my driveway. It's a half mile long, so I'll just have the hives along there. And from the hives, I've got this obstacle course where there's some bushes. I've got the RV. Oh, for fun, years ago, I bought a used ambulance, and I'll tell you, you'll never own a more fun vehicle than driving around in a used ambulance. So my obstacle course goes through the bushes, around the ambulance, down by the RV. And every time, if this is the side of the RV, when I come walking along, half the bees are in the air. Well, majority are in the air. But the half that are on my right are going to run into the RV, and they get confused and left behind. So every obstacle pulls off 100 bees, 200 bees, up to the point where, okay, I can get to the house, and I might only have 5 or 10 bees left on me. And at that point, I'll go in, and you walk in my front door, I go straight into a bathroom, and then any leftover bees, I'll just kill them, because my wife doesn't like it stung in our house for some reason. But, having this course, or jump in the car with the AC on max, and the bees will fly out the windows, and then I'll drive back off my driveway, a quarter mile, and then come back. But have a method that you can get the bees off of you without 500 bees going in the front door of your house. Your wife, your pets, whoever, kids, kids, what are they for? They just don't really appreciate the swarm of angry bees coming in the front door like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, and then there's always one or two that like to hide in some crevices. And that's just, as you get older and you really find out what arthritis is. I'm not sure how many younger guys don't understand this, but bee stings are wonderful for arthritis. And gosh, we're going on 2 hours, so let me tell you one last story that you're not going to believe this, but I know the guy that was there. The things that bee stings help with, I mean, you've heard about Lyme's disease and arthritis and so forth. So true story. Buddy of mine, and he sells really gentle bees, so you can work in a t-shirt and shorts and work the bees. He had an older guy come out, and he was showing them the bees. The guy wanted to buy some colonies, and you pull out the frame, and there's your queen and so forth. And they're doing this, and there's always one. This one bee flies straight at this older man and stings him in the white of his eye. I've never been stung in the eye, but I can imagine the pain level. Close up the hive, get him inside, get the stinger out. He's tearing up. 15, 20 minutes later, he's calmed down. He can see. He's not having a reaction. Okay, life goes on. Well, the guy calls him back a couple months later. He went into his eye doctor, and he was probably in his 70s, and the eye doctor had been telling him, "You've got cataracts. We'll have to, do the surgery." The eye doctor looked, and the eye he was stung in, his cataract had completely dissolved. He still had the other cataract, but that one was gone. So some of the take your choice of words, miracles, etc., it's amazing what bee stings can help with.
Yeah,
and I consider that part of my. I don't really take many pills, or hardly any, but I think stings are one of the medical treatments that I take happily. I just tell bees, don't sting me in the face. I'm a very handsome dude.
I know the feeling. I mean, I'm the same level of handsomeness, but yeah. I mean, I get stung a lot. Not a lot, but more than normal person. And I don't know if I have arthritis or anything, but I'm glad I don't think I have Lyme disease, because I'm sure I've had hundreds of ticks on me that I just were on. They got their fill and dropped off. But I hope that those things are true, because I hope that the stings that I get are enough to keep me from catching Lyme disease or arthritis. I don't think I have that, but I could see how getting stung in the eye. I mean, it could. There's chemical, explanations for that. I mean, I would be tempted to sting my other eye. I don't know.
What's funny is
right in the eyelid, like my eye was closed, but they didn't get my eyeball.
So Richard Thoms asked the question, did he sting in the other eye? As far as I know, no, he didn't. But many years ago, I was laying in bed and a dog jumped up on the bed and his paw slid right up my eye and actually scratched my cornea. And I mean, oh gosh, that was a level of pain I've never known before. Go in and see the eye doctor. He puts this drop in my eye that the pain was instantly gone. And I'm like, oh man, I want to buy a bottle of that stuff. And he said, no. It's some kind of a prescription thing. And it works temporary, 15 minutes. But he said if you used it for like a day continuously, you'll actually go blind. But, in terms of, here's my joke about Obamacare. Put a drop of that stuff in your eye, take the sting, wait a few minutes, take out the stinger, get another drop. Talk about a low cost and effective medical care. Big pharmacy will never pay for this research because, well, they do much better on profits with drug sales. But I think there's some incredible things that can come out of the hive, for medical care. So,
yeah,
anyways,
I'm right there with you. Well, yeah, we're right at 2 hours. I mean, I had a great time talking, and I think we left a couple doors open. We could talk about some things if you ever want to come back and hang out.
Yeah.
But it was great having you on here. You can see I'm getting tired. It's 10 o'clock at night here now, but yeah. So just thanks again, and we'll end it on that, and we'll see everybody on the next one. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Thanks. Everyone have a great night.